I try, God knows I try, but you're just harder to love. My mother's confession when I refused to give my brother my home. Original post. I never thought I'd be writing this at 2 a.m. in my laboratory's break room, but I can't go home to my apartment knowing what's waiting for me there. My hands are still shaking as I type this, partly from the 3 cups of coffee I've had and partly from the conversation that just imploded my understanding of my entire life. I'm Marcus, 29, and I've been a laboratory technician at a biomedical research facility for the past 6 years. It's not the most glamorous job. I spend my days running PCR tests, maintaining cell cultures, and ensuring our equipment stays calibrated, but it pays well enough for me to afford a decent 2-bedroom apartment in the city. I've always been proud of that apartment. It has exposed brick walls, gets beautiful morning light, and even has a small balcony where I grow herbs. It represented everything I'd worked for since leaving home at 18. My younger brother, Daniel, is 24 and works part-time at a grocery store while he figures things out. He's been figuring things out since dropping out of community college 3 years ago. He lives in a studio apartment that our mother subsidizes because, as she puts it, Danny needs more support to find his path. The studio is fine, clean, functional, but it's basically a glorified dorm room with a kitchenette. The dynamic between Daniel and me has always been complicated, though I only recently started understanding why. Growing up, I was what teachers called conscientious. I did my homework without being asked, kept my room clean, never missed curfew. Daniel was the opposite, charming, spontaneous, always testing boundaries. Our mother, Patricia, would laugh at his antics while lecturing me about setting a better example. When Daniel failed algebra, she hired him a tutor and threw him a party when he scraped by with a C-. When I got straight A's, she'd nod and say, "Well, that's expected from you, Marcus. You've always been so self-sufficient." I thought being self-sufficient was a compliment. I wore it like armor through high school, college, and into my career. While Daniel cycled through majors and our mother made excuses for him, I quietly built my life. I learned to cook because no one taught me. I figured out student loans because asking for help meant hearing about how Daniel was struggling more and needed the attention. I troubleshot my own problems because bringing them home meant being told I was making things difficult. The phrase that haunts me most came during my college graduation. As I walked across the stage to receive my bachelor's in biochemistry, I heard my mother tell my aunt, "Marcus has always been harder to love than Daniel. Some children just are." My aunt had asked why she seemed subdued, and that was her explanation. Harder to love. Not different to love, not challenging to understand. Harder to love. As if loving me required extra effort that loving Daniel didn't. Tonight, everything came to a head. Daniel got engaged last month to Sarah, a woman he's been dating for 8 months. She seems nice enough, though we've only met twice. She works in marketing and comes from what my mother breathlessly describes as a very good family. The wedding is planned for next spring, and my mother has been in full planning mode, despite Sarah's parents offering to handle most of it. I should have seen the ambush coming when my mother insisted on having dinner at my apartment instead of her house. She arrived with Daniel, who looked uncomfortable from the moment they walked in. They sat on my couch, the one I'd saved for 3 months to buy, and my mother looked around with an expression I can only describe as calculating. "Marcus," she began, in the tone she uses when she's about to say something for my own good, "we need to discuss the living situation." I assumed she meant Daniel and Sarah would be looking for a new place. I was wrong. "Sarah's family is very traditional," she continued. "They value family cohesion and support. When they come for the engagement party next month, it would be unfortunate if they discovered that Daniel, the groom, is living in a small studio while his older brother has all this space." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. "So," I finally managed. "So, I think it would be best if you and Daniel traded apartments. Just temporarily, of course. Through the wedding." The words hung in my living room like toxic fumes from a failed experiment. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. "You want me to give up my apartment?" I said slowly, making sure I understood. "Trade," my mother corrected. "Daniel's studio is perfectly adequate for someone single. You don't need all this space, and it would show Sarah's family that we support the couple properly. That we prioritize family." "I pay $1,800 a month for this place," I said. "Daniel pays $900, and you cover half of that." "Money isn't everything, Marcus. Family is about sacrifice. What has Daniel sacrificed?" The question erupted before I could stop it. 29 years of being the self-sufficient one, the harder-to-love one, crystallized into those 4 words. My mother's face hardened. "Daniel has struggled more than you. He doesn't have your advantages." "What advantages? I worked for everything I have." You've always been so rigid, Marcus. So difficult about everything. Daniel is getting married. He's finally making something of himself. The least you could do is support your brother instead of being selfish. I'm selfish. I stood up, my hands trembling. I'm selfish because I won't give up the home I've worked for? The home I pay for entirely by myself. You make everything so complicated, my mother sighed, as if I was exhausting her. This is exactly what I mean. You're harder to love, Marcus. You always have been. I try, God knows I try, but you make everything a battle. There it was. The phrase that had haunted me since graduation, weaponized and aimed directly at my chest. Daniel finally spoke up, his voice quiet. Mom, maybe we should. Daniel, honey, let me handle this. She turned back to me. I'm not asking, Marcus. If Sarah's family finds out about the living situation and judges Daniel for it, it could affect their entire future. Is that what you want? To sabotage your brother's happiness because you're too proud to help? Get out. My voice was barely a whisper. Excuse me. Get out of my apartment. Both of you. Marcus, you're being dramatic. Get out. They left. Daniel mumbled something that might have been an apology, but I couldn't hear it over the roaring in my ears. I grabbed my keys and drove to the lab, where I've been sitting ever since, trying to understand how wanting to keep the home I pay for makes me the villain in my family story. The worst part of me wonders if she's right. Maybe I am harder to love. Maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with me that made my own mother have to work harder to feel what should come naturally. Maybe that's why I'm good at lab work, following protocols, maintaining precise conditions, controlling variables. Maybe I gravitated toward science because even I knew I wasn't built for the messy, illogical world of human connection. I don't know what to do. The engagement party is in 3 weeks. My phone has 17 missed calls from my mother and 4 from Daniel. There's a voicemail I haven't listened to, but I can see it's 3 minutes long, which means it's either an apology or a more detailed explanation of why I'm destroying the family. I just wanted to be proud of something I'd built. I just wanted to have one thing that was mine, that I'd earned, that proved I was worth something despite being harder to love. But maybe that's the point. Maybe people who are harder to love don't get to have nice things. Maybe we're supposed to give them up for the people who come by love naturally. I don't know. I just know I can't go home tonight. Update 1, 5 days later. I wanted to thank everyone who responded to my original post. I read every comment from my phone while sitting in that break room, and many of you gave me the courage to finally go home that night, to my home, in my apartment. But the real update starts with what happened the next morning at work. I was running on 2 hours of sleep and probably looked like death warmed over when my supervisor, Dr. Rebecca Chen, stopped by my bench. Marcus, can I see you in my office? I assumed I was about to be reprimanded for my obviously subpar performance that morning. I'd already contaminated one culture and had to restart an extraction twice. But when I sat down across from her desk, she just studied me for a moment before saying, I saw your car in the parking lot until 4 a.m. That's the 3rd time this week you've been here past midnight. What's going on? I could have lied. I could have said I was catching up on work or volunteering for extra hours. Instead, maybe because I was exhausted or maybe because she was looking at me with genuine concern, something I realized I hadn't seen in so long, I broke down. I told her everything. The apartment situation, the harder to love comment, the years of being told I was too rigid, too difficult, too much and not enough all at once. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment before saying, Marcus, can I share something with you? She told me about her own family, how she'd been the difficult one because she wanted to pursue science instead of the traditional path her parents had planned. How her younger sister was showered with praise for every small accomplishment while Rebecca's full scholarship to MIT was met with, why do you always have to be so ambitious? Why can't you be satisfied? It took me years of therapy to understand that I wasn't difficult, she said. I was inconvenient for the narrative they'd written. Your mother has cast you as the stable one, the one who doesn't need anything, because that makes her life easier. But that doesn't make it true, and it certainly doesn't make it right. She pulled out her phone and sent me a contact. Dr. James Kozlowski. He specializes in family dynamics, particularly something called scapegoating. I think you should call him. I hesitated. I don't know if I can afford. Your insurance covers it. I checked. Marcus, you're one of the best techs I've ever had. You're methodical, reliable, and intuitive about the work. But more than that, you're a good person who's been convinced he's not. Make the call. I called that afternoon. Dr. Kozlowski had a cancellation and could see me the next day. That first session was like having someone turn on lights in a room I'd been stumbling through in the dark for 29 years. He introduced me to terms I'd never heard: family scapegoating, emotional parentification, narcissistic family dynamics. He explained how some families unconsciously designate roles: the golden child who can do no wrong, and the scapegoat who bears the family's dysfunction. Your mother's statement that you're harder to love is a projection, he explained. She finds it harder to control you, to fit you into the role she's assigned. That's not the same as being harder to love. In fact, people who set boundaries and have self-respect often get labeled as difficult by those who benefit from their compliance. He gave me homework: write down every instance I could remember of being told I was difficult, rigid, or harder to love, and then write what was actually happening in that moment. The pattern was obvious once I saw it. Age 8, too difficult, when I asked why Daniel got a bigger birthday party despite my grades being better. Actual situation: questioning unfair treatment. Age 14, so rigid, when I insisted on keeping my bedroom door locked after Daniel repeatedly took my things. Actual situation: establishing boundaries. Age 17, making everything complicated, when I asked why my college savings were being used for Daniel's car. Actual situation: advocating for myself. Age 22, always so selfish, when I couldn't come home for Daniel's third attempt at a community college graduation party because I had finals. Actual situation: prioritizing my education. The list went on for pages. Meanwhile, my phone continued exploding with messages. My mother had moved from anger to manipulation to guilt to threats. She'd told extended family that I was having a breakdown and was jealous of Daniel's happiness. She'd even called my work, though thank God she got Dr. Chen, who told her that personal calls weren't permitted, and hung up. Daniel had been quieter, just one text a day: "Can we talk?" Today, I finally responded: "I'll talk to you. Alone." "No, Mom. We're meeting tomorrow at a coffee shop near my apartment. I don't know what I'm going to say, but Dr. Kozlowski helped me prepare some boundaries. I will not trade apartments, I will not apologize for having boundaries, I will not accept being called difficult for protecting my own interests, I am willing to support Daniel in ways that don't require me to sacrifice my well-being. I'm terrified but also oddly calm. For the first time in my life, I don't feel crazy for being upset. I feel validated. I feel seen. I feel like maybe, just maybe, I'm not harder to love. I've just been loving people who made loving me conditional on how useful I was to them. The engagement party is in 2.5 weeks. I haven't decided if I'm going, but I have decided that my apartment is staying mine. Update 2, 2 weeks later. The coffee shop meeting with Daniel went nothing like I expected. He showed up 20 minutes early and was already on his second espresso when I arrived. The moment he saw me, he stood up, awkward, unsure, nothing like the golden child who usually walked through life with our mother's constant validation as his safety net. "Thanks for coming," he said. I wasn't sure you would." We sat down, and for a minute, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel said, "Mom's lost it, Marcus. Like, completely lost it." He told me what had been happening since I'd gone no contact. Our mother had been calling Sarah multiple times a day, explaining how I was going through something, and how Daniel needed extra support during this family crisis. She'd started planning the engagement party to be held at a country club, without asking Sarah or her parents, had invited people Sarah had never met, and kept referring to it as Daniel's triumph over adversity. "Sarah's freaked out," Daniel admitted. "She keeps asking what adversity I've overcome, and I don't know what to tell her. Mom's created this whole narrative where I'm some struggling hero and you're the villain who's trying to sabotage my happiness." "And you believe her?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "No," Daniel said quickly. Then, quieter, "Maybe. I don't know. Marcus, I need to tell you something." He pulled out his phone and showed me a text thread with our mother from the day before they came to my apartment. She'd been coaching him on what to say, how to look appropriately struggling, and even suggested he cry if necessary to make me feel guilty enough to trade apartments. "She said it was for my own good," Daniel continued. "That Sarah's family would judge me if they knew the truth about my living situation. But Marcus, Sarah's been to my studio a dozen times. Her parents have been there. They don't care. They actually said they admired that I was living within my means." The revelation hit me like a misaligned centrifuge, everything I thought I knew suddenly thrown off balance. "So this whole thing was Mom," Daniel finished. "She's embarrassed that her favorite son isn't as successful as the son he stopped, swallowing hard. "The son she says is harder to love." It was the first time Daniel had ever acknowledged our mother's favoritism directly. "She's always said that about you," he continued, not meeting my eyes. Ever since we were kids. Daniel needs more help. Marcus is so self-sufficient. Daniel's special. Marcus is difficult. I thought it meant I was better somehow. More lovable. But watching her these past 2 weeks, seeing how she's willing to destroy your life for some imaginary slight to my reputation, I'm starting to realize being her favorite isn't love. It's possession. We talked for 3 hours. Daniel told me things I'd never known. How our mother would tell him I thought he was a failure. I never said that. How she'd warned him I was jealous of his natural charm. I wasn't. How she'd convinced him that every boundary I set was a personal attack on him. It never was. I'm sorry, he said finally. I'm so fucking sorry, Marcus. I let her pit us against each other because it benefited me. I took the easy path, the extra help, the excuses, and I never once thought about what it cost you. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was. But mostly, I was just sad for both of us. 2 brothers who could have been allies, turned into competitors for a love that was never real to begin with. Daniel had made a decision. He was going to tell Sarah everything and let her decide if she still wanted to marry into our dysfunction. He was also going to tell our mother that the engagement party was cancelled. At least, her version of it was. Sarah and I will plan our own party, he said. Something small. You're invited, if you want to come. Mom isn't. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Our mother called me screaming that I'd poisoned Daniel against her, and that I was destroying the family with my selfishness. When that didn't work, she tried guilt, saying she was having chest pains from the stress. Daniel called her bluff and offered to call 911. She hung up. Then came the extended family offensive, cousins, aunts, uncles, all reaching out to ask why I was doing this to my mother. Dr. Kozlowski had prepared me for this. It's called a smear campaign, he explained. When a narcissistic parent loses control of the narrative, they recruit flying monkeys, people who carry out their bidding without understanding the full situation. I had a form response ready. This is a private family matter that's being addressed. I appreciate your concern, but I won't be discussing it further. The engagement party, Sarah and Daniel's version, was last weekend. It was small, just close friends and Sarah's immediate family, held at a nice restaurant downtown. I almost didn't go, but Dr. Chen, who's become something of a mentor through all this, convinced me to try. Sarah pulled me aside during cocktails. She's a petite woman with fierce eyes, and when she spoke, I understood why Daniel was marrying her. Daniel told me everything, she said. About your mom, about the apartment, about the favoritism. I'm horrified. My parents are horrified. We had no idea. She paused. I grew up with 3 brothers. My parents would never tell one of us we were harder to love. That's not normal, Marcus. That's abuse. Later that night, Sarah did something I'll never forget. She stood up during toasts and said, I want to thank everyone for coming, especially Marcus. Daniel's told me how much his brother has overcome, and how much strength it takes to stand up for yourself when your own family tries to tear you down. Marcus, you're not harder to love. You're just harder to manipulate, and that's a quality I hope to have in my life. I'm proud to be joining a family that includes you. Daniel found me afterwards, crying in the bathroom. Yes, I'm a 29-year-old man crying in a restaurant bathroom. Dr. Kozlowski says it's healthy. I'm choosing to believe him. I meant what I said about therapy, Daniel told me. I'm starting next week. I need to understand how I became someone who could watch my brother suffer and think I was the victim. That was the update I planned to post, a story of recognition, reconciliation, and the beginning of healing. But something happened yesterday that changed everything. Sarah's mother called me. She'd been doing some thinking since the party and wanted to meet. We had lunch, and she told me she recognized the dynamics I described because she'd lived them herself with her own sister. My parents did the same thing, she explained. My sister was the golden child, I was the scapegoat. It took me decades to understand that their love was transactional, not unconditional. But Marcus, what saved me was realizing that chosen family is just as valid as biological family. Then she said something that broke me all over again, but in a good way. You're going to be my son-in-law's brother, which makes you family to me. And in this family, no one is harder to love. Everyone is just loved, period. No conditions, no transactions, no roles to play. Just loved. I'm typing this update from my apartment. My apartment, with its exposed brick and morning light and herb garden on the balcony. Daniel and Sarah came over for dinner last night. We cooked together, laughed at stupid jokes, and didn't talk about our mother once. It felt like the relationship we could have had all along if we hadn't been cast in roles neither of us chose. Our mother is still calling, still leaving voicemails that swing between rage and tears. I haven't blocked her yet. Dr. Kozlowski says that's a decision I need to make for myself, not because someone tells me to. But I also haven't answered. I'm not ready. I may never be ready. What I am ready for is to stop believing I'm harder to love. Because the truth is, the people who matter, Dr. Chen, Dr. Kozlowski, Sarah, her family, and maybe even Daniel now, don't find me hard to love at all. They just find me worthy of love, exactly as I am. Final update, 3 months later. I wasn't planning on updating again, but something remarkable happened this weekend that feels like the right way to close this chapter. Daniel and Sarah got married. Not the spring wedding my mother had been planning, but a small December ceremony with just 20 guests. Sarah's parents' backyard, transformed with fairy lights and winter flowers. It was perfect in its simplicity, which is probably why my mother would have hated it. She wasn't invited. The decision to exclude her came after what Daniel calls the Thanksgiving incident. Despite being explicitly told she wasn't welcome at Sarah's family Thanksgiving, our mother showed up anyway, carrying a pie and wearing what Daniel described as her wounded mother costume, a black dress that looked more appropriate for a funeral than a holiday dinner. Sarah's father, a gentleman who rarely raises his voice, met her at the door and told her to leave. She tried to push past him, claiming she had a right to see her son on Thanksgiving. That's when Sarah stepped in. "You have no rights here," Sarah told her. "You're not welcome in this home until you can acknowledge the damage you've done and commit to changing. We've given you resources for therapists who specialize in narcissistic behavior. Use them." Our mother left, but not before sending a group text to every extended family member claiming she'd been physically removed from her son's Thanksgiving and that I had completed my destruction of the family. The flying monkeys descended again, but this time, Daniel was ready. He sent his own group message. "Mom has been emotionally abusing Marcus and manipulating me for our entire lives. She calls Marcus harder to love, which is psychological abuse. She tried to force him to give up his apartment for my benefit without my knowledge or consent. Sarah and I have made the decision to distance ourselves until she seeks professional help. Anyone who cannot respect this boundary is also not welcome in our lives." Half the family blocked him. The other half reached out to both of us with variations of, "We always wondered why she treated you boys so differently." But back to the wedding. Daniel asked me to be his best man 2 months ago. I almost said no, not because I didn't want to support him, but because I wasn't sure I could handle the weight of it. Dr. Kozlowski helped me work through it. This isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing a different future. The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah looked radiant, Daniel cried through his vows, and Sarah's father officiated with warmth and humor. But the moment that will stay with me forever came during Daniel's speech at the reception. He clinked his glass, and the small group quieted down. Daniel looked at me, then at Sarah, then began. "Most grooms thank their best man for being there for them. I need to do the opposite. Marcus, I need to apologize for all the times I wasn't there for you." The backyard went silent. Our mother raised us in a sick system where my comfort came at the cost of your dignity. Every opportunity one got was taken from you. Every excuse made for me was balanced by criticism of you. She called you harder to love, and I let her because it made me feel special. But Marcus, you were never harder to love. You were just harder to control. You had integrity I didn't have, strength I didn't have, and self-respect I didn't have. He paused, visibly composing himself. "I'm in therapy now, learning to unpack 24 years of manipulation. Learning that being the golden child isn't a privilege, it's its own form of abuse. It kept me weak, dependent, and complicit in hurting the one person who should have been my closest ally. Marcus, you're not just my best man today. You're the best man I know. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the brother you always deserved." There wasn't a dry eye in that backyard. Sarah's mother hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. Dr. Chen, who I'd invited as my +1, whispered, "This is what healing looks like." The plot twist came during the mother-son dance, or what would have been the mother-son dance. Instead, Daniel danced with Sarah's mother, who had emotionally adopted him, her words, the moment she understood our family dynamics. Watching them laugh and spin to, "What a wonderful world," I felt something shift in my chest, a loosening of a knot I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. Our mother found out about the wedding through Facebook, when a distant cousin posted a photo. The meltdown was spectacular, involving threatened legal action, for what, we're not sure, calls to both our workplaces, both immediately shut down by our supervisors, and an attempt to file a missing person report for Daniel. The police were not amused. But here's the growth. Neither Daniel nor I engaged. We didn't defend ourselves, explain ourselves, or justify ourselves. We just lived our lives. Last week was our first joint therapy session. Dr. Kozlowski recommended it, and Daniel's therapist agreed. We're working on rebuilding our relationship without our mother's toxic influence. It's awkward and painful, and sometimes we both end up crying, but it's also the most honest we've ever been with each other. We've started a new tradition: Sunday dinners at my apartment. Daniel and Sarah come over, we cook together, and we talk about everything except our mother. Last week, Sarah announced she's pregnant. Daniel immediately said, "This child will never, ever hear that they're harder to love." "No child should," Sarah added, looking at me. "Ever." As for our mother, she's still sending messages through various channels. The latest is that she's dying of grief, and will regret abandoning her. Dr. Kozlowski reminded me that grief is what you feel when you lose something you love, not something you control. "Let her grieve," he said. "She's mourning the loss of control, not the loss of her sons. There's a difference." Yesterday, I got a letter from her, an actual, physical letter. I recognized her handwriting and almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. It was 3 pages of the same narratives. I'm ungrateful, I've poisoned Daniel against her, I've destroyed the family. But at the bottom, almost as an afterthought, she wrote, "I did my best. If my best wasn't good enough, that's your burden to carry, not mine." I showed it to Dr. Kozlowski. He read it twice, then said, "She's right about one thing. She probably did do her best. But her best was harmful, and you don't have to accept harm just because someone didn't mean it. You're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if that someone is your mother." I'm keeping the letter. Not as a reminder of pain, but as evidence of growth. 6 months ago, that letter would have destroyed me. I would have questioned everything, apologized for existing, maybe even given up my apartment to prove I wasn't the monster she painted me as. Today, I read it, felt sad for her inability to self-reflect, and then went to dinner with my chosen family. The apartment saga feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only 3 months. In that time, I've gained a sister-in-law who fiercely defends me, rebuilt a relationship with my brother, found mentorship in my supervisor, and learned that being harder to love was never about me. It was about control, manipulation, and a woman who needed her children to play roles instead of being people. Dr. Chen asked me yesterday if I regret how things turned out. I told her the truth. I regret that it took 29 years to see the truth. I regret the relationship Daniel and I could have had. I regret believing I was harder to love. But I don't regret standing my ground. I don't regret keeping my apartment. And I definitely don't regret discovering that the people who matter don't find me hard to love at all. They just find me worthy of love. Period. No conditions, no transactions, no roles to play. Just loved. My name is Marcus. I'm a laboratory technician with a nice apartment that I earned. I have a brother who's learning to be a real brother, a sister-in-law who chose to make me family, and a support system that sees me for who I am, not who I was told to be. And I am not harder to love. I never was. Thank you to everyone who followed this story. Your support, advice, and validation meant more than you'll ever know. To anyone else who's been told they're harder to love, you're not. You're just in the wrong story. Write yourself a better one.